In the year 1324, a man left his kingdom with 60,000 people, 100 camels loaded with gold, and one goal: to pray in Mecca. By the time he came home, he had accidentally destroyed the economy of an entire region. He didn't do it with weapons. He didn't do it with war. He did it by being too generous. This is the story of Mansa Musa, a king so wealthy that historians still can't agree on how rich he actually was because no number seems big enough. Some call him the richest human being who has ever lived, and almost nobody has heard of him. To understand Mansa Musa, you first have to understand the empire he ruled, because most people have never even heard of it. The Mali Empire, in the 14th century, was one of the largest empires on Earth. At its peak, it stretched across parts of what is now Mali, Senegal, Mauritania, Niger, Guinea, and beyond, roughly the size of Western Europe. And it wasn't poor, backwater, or primitive. It was one of the most important trading empires in the world, sitting right on top of the two things that made medieval economies run: gold and salt. Mansa Musa, his name basically translates to King Musa, took the throne around 1312, after the previous ruler, Abu Bakr II, allegedly sailed off into the Atlantic Ocean on an expedition and never came back. Nobody knows what happened to him. Some historians speculate he may have reached the Americas nearly 2 centuries before Columbus. It's unproven, but it tells you something about the kind of ambition running through this royal family. Mansa Musa inherited an empire already rich in gold. But he didn't just inherit wealth, he expanded it, doubling the size of the Mali Empire during his reign through military conquest, adding city after city, trade route after trade route, until he controlled almost half of the old world's gold supply. Let that sink in. Not half of Africa's gold. Half of the gold in the known world at the time. So where did all this gold actually come from? Mali sat at the crossroads of the trans-Saharan trade routes, connecting North Africa to the gold-rich regions of West Africa, places like Bambuk, Bur, and later Akan territories. Gold flowed north across the desert on camel caravans, traded for salt, textiles, and goods from the Mediterranean and Middle East. Here's the wild part. Mansa Musa's empire didn't even fully control the gold mines. It controlled the trade routes the gold had to pass through. That was enough. Whoever controlled the roads controlled the wealth. Timbuktu and Jenne, two of Mali's great cities, became legendary trading hubs, not just for gold, but for salt, which in the medieval world was worth nearly its weight in gold because of how essential it was for preserving food. By some modern estimates, adjusting for inflation and the sheer scale of resources under his personal control, Mansa Musa's fortune has been valued at around $400 billion in today's money. Although honestly, most historians will tell you that number is basically a guess, because there's no accurate way to price out controlling half the world's gold supply in a 21st century currency. The truth is simpler and more staggering. He wasn't just rich. He was unmeasurably rich. Rich in a way that breaks the tools we normally use to measure wealth. And in 1324, he decided to take that wealth on a road trip. As a devout Muslim ruler, Mansa Musa was expected, like all Muslims who were able, to complete the Hajj, the pilgrimage to Mecca, at least once in his lifetime. Most people who made this journey did it modestly. Mansa Musa did not do anything modestly. Here's what historians believe he brought with him. Estimates range from 12,000 to 60,000 people, including soldiers, officials, entertainers, and slaves. Some accounts describe 500 servants, each carrying a 4-pound staff of solid gold, walking ahead of him. A caravan of 80 to 100 camels, each one loaded with roughly 300 pounds of gold dust. Do the math on that for a second. Even at the conservative end, that's tens of thousands of pounds of pure gold, moving across the Sahara Desert on the backs of camels, for a journey that would take almost a year to complete one way. The pilgrimage route took him through Cairo, one of the great cities of the Islamic world at the time, and this is where things start to go sideways, economically speaking. Mansa Musa didn't just pass through Cairo. He stopped. He shopped. He gave. He handed out gold to the poor. He gifted gold to local officials. He built mosques along the route. He reportedly gave away so much gold in Cairo that he single-handedly changed the local economy, not by spending it on goods and services in a normal transactional way, but by essentially flooding the market with free gold. Here's where the story turns from "wow, that's a lot of gold" to "wait, this actually broke an economy." Basic economics. When the supply of something increases dramatically while demand stays roughly the same, the value of that thing goes down. Gold, in the medieval Middle East, functioned essentially like modern currency. It had a relatively stable, understood value, and that's what made trade and commerce function smoothly. When Mansa Musa arrived in Cairo and started giving away enormous quantities of gold, not through trade, not through selling something of equal value, just giving it away, he suddenly and drastically increased the amount of gold circulating in the local economy. The result: the value of gold in Cairo and the surrounding region plummeted. Historical accounts, including from the Arab historian Al-Umari, who visited Cairo about a dozen years after Mansa Musa's visit, describe the lingering effects. Gold prices remained depressed for over a decade after his visit. Think about what that actually means for regular people living there. Merchants who had gold reserves suddenly found them worth far less. Prices for goods, when measured against gold, effectively spiked because it now took more gold to buy the same things. Inflation rippled through the local economy in a way that some historians argue took 12 years to fully stabilize. One king, one pilgrimage, one act of extreme generosity, and an entire regional economy took over a decade to recover. There's actually a fascinating footnote to this. On his way back from Mecca, Mansa Musa reportedly realized what he'd done to Cairo's economy, and in an attempt to fix it, tried to borrow back gold from local lenders at interest, in what some historians describe as an early attempt at tightening the money supply, 600 years before economists had a name for it. He accidentally caused an inflation crisis, and then accidentally became one of the first recorded people in history to attempt to correct one. The pilgrimage didn't just wreck Cairo's economy. It also did something else. It put Mali on the map. Literally. Word of Mansa Musa's wealth spread across the Islamic world and eventually reached Europe. In 1375, a Spanish cartographer created the Catalan Atlas, one of the most important maps of the medieval period, and on it, sitting in West Africa, is an illustration of a king on a throne, holding a golden orb and a scepter, labeled as the ruler of Mali. That image is believed to depict Mansa Musa. For centuries, it was one of Europe's primary visual references for the wealth of West Africa, a place many Europeans at the time knew almost nothing about, except that somewhere out there was a king who had more gold than anyone could imagine. Mansa Musa also brought back more than depleted local economies from his trip. He returned with scholars, architects, and Islamic teachers, most famously the Andalusian architect Abu Ishaq al-Sahili, who is credited with helping design the Jingreber Mosque in Timbuktu, a structure that still stands today, nearly 700 years later. Under Mansa Musa, Timbuktu transformed into a genuine center of learning, libraries, universities, and scholars from across the Islamic world flocked there. At its height, it's estimated the city was home to tens of thousands of students, and the manuscripts produced there are still being studied and preserved today. So this wasn't just a story about gold. It was a story about a kingdom actively investing that wealth into education, architecture, and culture, turning West Africa into a place the rest of the world suddenly had to take seriously. So if he was this wealthy, this influential, and this well-documented in his own time, why does almost nobody know his name today? A few reasons. First, most written accounts of Mansa Musa come from outside Mali, Arab historians, North African scholars, European cartographers. Very few detailed primary sources from within the Mali Empire itself survived, partly due to the vulnerability of manuscripts to time, climate, and later colonial disruption. Second, Western historical education, for centuries, largely centered European and Middle Eastern narratives, particularly when it came to world history curriculums. Empires like Mali, despite their size and wealth, often got reduced to a footnote, if they were mentioned at all. Third, and maybe most ironic, his wealth was so abstract and so difficult to quantify that it almost worked against his legacy. There's no surviving throne room, no catalog treasury, no single verified number historians can point to and say, here, This is exactly how rich he was. That ambiguity, weirdly, made him easier to forget, because he doesn't fit neatly into a single, quotable historical fact the way, say, a Rockefeller or a Rothschild does. But that's exactly what makes him worth remembering. Not because we can put an exact number on his fortune, but because the scale of it was large enough to warp an economy just by moving through it. Mansa Musa didn't build his legacy through conquest alone, or through hoarding wealth behind palace walls. He built it by moving through the world so lavishly that the world had no choice but to notice, and for a little while, no choice but to struggle to keep up. He crashed an economy without ever intending to. He funded scholars, mosques, and universities that outlasted him by centuries. And somewhere between a forgotten historical footnote and modern, richest person ever listicles, the real Mansa Musa, the empire builder, the reformer, the accidental economist, got lost. This series is about finding people like him again. If you want the next forgotten billionaire, let me know in the comments who you want covered next, and subscribe, because history's richest people are a lot stranger and a lot more interesting than the ones making headlines today.